It's so weird how it becomes a privilege to do something that
Even
you
Then
love.
people
physical
ask, why
films,
did you get
just
your bachelor's
anything
educated?
art based in general,
Mm.
is quite difficult.
Okay, professional. Um, Firstly, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. I'm doing really well. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Please do go ahead and introduce yourself and briefly tell us about what you do as a creative.
hmm So I'm Habibah Choudhrey. I'm a British Pakistani. I'm currently 23 years old, and I graduated from computer science in June 2022. As a creative, I kind of am involved in like a few different like practices, but I'd say like my main creative practice is to give materials a second life after they've fulfilled their main purpose.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that I'm really interested in from like kind of like a sustainability point of view, and
Mm-hmm.
also just this idea of like, looking at one person's trash and being able to turn that into a piece of art. And the way that I like mainly do this is I will paint on like damaged vinyl records that can no longer be used. And so I will use them as a canvas to turn them to a new piece of art. And then another really big way is I wear contact lenses, and at the end of every month, once they've expired, usually they just be thrown away. But I actually use them as a mini canvas as well. And that's another way for me to, approach this method of sustainability.
That's really cool, to be honest. Um,
Thanks.
anyway, if you don't mind, please do share with us your journey from way back when, before high school, even wherever you want to start, up until where you are now. I would really love for the audience to possibly, get something from your journey or relate or learn something or take something away from it. So just take your time and like share everything that you would like to share. And yeah.
Okay, cool. Um, so I'll start at the beginning. So I've always kind of been interested in art. I've always been quite creative. I think like my family in general has always been like that. But I would say like my main inspiration is my older sister, who is an amazing artist. I'm gonna like put a mashallah in there, but she's amazing. And her name is Sarah Chowdhury, if like anyone wants to look her up as well. She like specializes in digital Islamic art, and growing up, like she used to like paint and stuff, and I would spend a lot of time with her. And so as she would paint, I would like draw my own things, or she would like give me a canvas to just like experiment on. And I remember like being really young. Like I remember being really young and being really frustrated because you would see like a certain image in your head, and then you would try and like paint or draw it, and it wouldn't go onto canvas, and it would be like so frustrating. Like
Mhm.
that's like one of my early memories when it comes to like creating. And then a while after that, I remember like sitting with her and painting, and her like telling me, which I think is a rule that we've all learned as artists at some point in our life, her sitting me down and just being like, with art, there's like no such thing as a mistake. Like, especially because we were working with a critic, she was like, you can always paint over it. So it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter if you do something wrong. Which is like, it was just like such a freeing concept in that
Mhm.
moment, because it meant I could, you know, properly like just do whatever, and it didn't matter, right? Like there was no consequence. Um, and then also like so I also do like embroidery as a way of like part of my creative practice as well. I'm quite into sewing. I've started exploring with like crochet in terms of my art as well, and like beaded embroidery, which I can go into more detail later about. But that's also something that I learned from my mother growing up. Like I remember she was working on a dupatta, which is like a shawl that we wear in like Pakistan, and she was embroidering it, and she sat me down next to her. She got me like a little embroidery doily, and she taught me like how to do certain stitches, which I like did like working alongside her. So I'd say like those were my bases of why art like meant so much to me and why like I found it really interesting. Yeah, so then growing up, I'd always like took to art as my escape. So like the next, I guess, like big moment for me was like when we were deciding subjects for GCSEs in the UK, which is like the main kind of point where you like start making choices for yourself. For me, the biggest thing is I knew I wanted to study art because I knew that I needed at least one subject that I enjoyed. In terms of my future at that point, I was still kind of like thinking that I wanted to do something very like STEM, very academic. Like I saw that more as my future than like potentially a career in art. So like that was a big thing for me. And kind of at this moment, it was like art felt like it meant a lot to me, but I didn't know if I meant a lot to art, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Because I remember like being in secondary school and like having some of my friends being chosen for like gifted programs when it came to art, and I wasn't one of them. And I was like, oh, like am I just, do I not have this innate talent? Like I was kind of still stuck in this idea that you had to already be talented, or you had to have a certain something. And so when I was studying art at GCSE, like when you get more of kind of this insight into how art works, more into it as like an actual profession, as an actual subject, rather than just something that you do for fun, there was like this kind of like great big like imposter syndrome, right, where you're just like, oh, am I like good enough? Like it kind of felt like you either had to have it or not, right? And it was like, do I have this? And there would be little moments where I would produce something and I would be kind of like shocked by it. Like I'd be like, oh wow, I did that. Yeah. And it would feel so good in those moments. And then in other moments it would be like I would look around at other people and I would tell myself, I'm not the right type of person to study. Like this was a really strange concept I had. I decided not to study A-level art because I just felt like I wasn't enough of an artist. Like I wasn't talented enough, or I didn't have enough ideas, or I didn't connect with art as strongly or as deeply to be able, like I didn't have the right to study it. That's how I felt. Which was like, looking back, is such a strange concept, but I know the reasons why I had those thoughts, because like I felt like you had to be very like certain about your journey. You had to have a very distinctive style. You had to know what you wanted from art. And I didn't have that. I didn't have that relationship with art at that point. So I did my GCSE in art, and then I was kind of apart from it for a while. Like I painted a little bit here and there. I had a sketchbook. There was an artist who, I can't remember her name right now, which is really bad. But there is an artist, and she would work in acrylic inks, and she would do these amazing landscape paintings in her sketchbook. And she would like travel the world, and like I was amazed by her stuff. Like I was so like, it blew me away. It was so gorgeous. And one of my favorite mediums was always oil paint, because I just loved the way that you were able to blend with it. I always found acrylic very confining, because it would dry so fast. And watercolor, I've never been a fan of watercolor. The fact that you have to be so intentional with every brush stroke. I'm not that kind of person. I like the idea of being able to make mistakes and covering it up. So when I discovered acrylic inks, and I like was able to see that you were able to get like the same effects that you get with oil paint, but with like acrylic inks, I just found that so cool. And I had already been interested in inks when I was doing my GCSEs. I did work primarily in like Indian ink. and all of those colors. I found that like really cool. I love the vibrancy of the colors. So I was like, oh, I'm going to start a sketchbook. I'm going to start painting. I painted 2 things and then I got distracted. And I put down that sketchbook and I did not pick it up again for like 2 years. And sixth form happened, and honestly, I was probably like my most disconnected from art at that point. I didn't really do anything with art. So this was up until like I was about 18, and then I had my gap year, and I started getting back into it a bit, like more for myself here and there. And like I would draw just a bit here and there, but it was still kind of where, in an ideal world, maybe I could pursue art, but it wasn't even something that I was considering. I was still very much, I need to consider what uni I want to get into. I need to consider what I want to study. Like I was still very much focused on that, like this idea of one career path. And then so like during my gap year, I started I was just like, okay, let's get into uni. And then I started uni, and I think like I just like figured that I wanted to like, have fun with things. I wanted to like start having fun. And I think I was starting to paint a little bit more here and there. Still not at like a level that I really wanted to, but actually just before uni, I did a little project for a friend who, as her gift, she was moving out for university. I like made her a little book, and in this little book was like a poem, and alongside every poem, I painted or drew her an image that I felt like represented the poem. And I think that was like the start of me actually pushing my talents, where I started to improve. Like that was the moment where I really saw myself starting to like massively improve in my art, because I was actually steadily putting in the work. And like it was just really fun to actually have a project in mind and complete it.
Mm-hmm.
And so like that was like kind of a push that I needed. And then I started uni, and I would do like little gifts for friends here and there, right? Like at big events, like we'd have Eid, like for Eid gifts I would like do paintings, and that was like really cool as well. And yeah, so that was like a big thing. And then I think it was actually, so my contact lenses, the way I started painting those, I had a midterm in my first year. I had a midterm that I wanted to study for, and I had one of my contact lenses that I hadn't thrown away yet. It was on my desk, and I was staring at this computer screen, and I did not want to study. Like none of the information was going into my head. I was so bored. I was like, what am I doing? And I don't know, I had this contact lens there, I had my paints to the side, and I just picked up my brush and I was like, oh, like I just started like painting on it. Like, when you just start doodling. And then like I was like, oh, it would be really cool if I like managed to paint something small. And I remember my very first thing, it was like clouds. And I just painted these tiny little clouds onto this lens. And by the time I was done, I was like, okay, wow, this is like really cool.
Yeah.
Like I was like, this was a really good time, and that really kind of like set it going for me. Like so I started like painting on my contact lenses. I would like come up with new ideas. I'd be like, oh, it would be really cool if I was able to paint this in miniature, or it would be really cool if I was able to paint this in miniature. And basically, yeah, so like it was just like a little like series that I started working on. I started asking friends for like ideas for things that that I could paint. And then it was also really fun to be able to paint something in miniature and then actually have people recognize that, because that's like a big problem with miniature painting, I feel like, is that like if you're painting so small, sometimes it can be hard to still convey whatever you're trying to convey.
True.
So like that was also really fun. And then I think my next jump in terms of my artistic ability, and in terms of like art being a thing was, firstly, in my second year, I started studying Japanese at uni, which was really fun. It was a really cool time. And I remember we had like a little competition where it was like for the Japanese New Year, we had to like design these cards. And so like I painted like a sunset, and like cherry blossoms. And like for the blossoms, I embroidered little blossoms onto the card, with like French knots. And then we also had to like write the message, the alphabets. So like I think it was like kanji and hiragana, and so I embroidered that on as well. And I remember winning it. Like I won the competition, and it was so cool because like the other people's like their cards were also like so amazing. Like everyone went all out. So like when you start getting like kind of seen for your art, it's like really fun. Like this is like a tiny little competition, right? This is just in like my Japanese class, a tiny little class in my second year. It was nothing big, but it was just really nice to be able to walk past on my way to class and see like my little card on the wall on like the number one spot.
Oh.
Yeah. So then and then COVID happened and lockdown. And that was horrid. That was insane. That was mad. I think like you're probably gonna have this conversation with like loads of other people on the podcast. I'm sure it affected us all in some way. But I would say the biggest way it affected me was that I had all of this time, and suddenly I was like, okay, I'm going to start doing projects that I always meant to do and never got around to doing. And for me, this was when I started painting on vinyl records, because like I'd always wanted to paint on them. I thought it was such a cool way to decorate a room. So I bought a bunch off of eBay for like really cheap. And I started thinking about things I'd wanted to paint on them. And at this point, it was like less like me exploring my own artistic like style and stuff, and like ideas, and it was more just like, oh, I'm gonna do this as a decoration. And it was like when Bob Ross was a huge thing as well, right? So then everyone was having like their little Bob Ross online calls where like we'd follow a tutorial, and just like working like on these records, working to like build up like a collection that I could put on my walls. I saw my skills like improve so much, like rapidly, because I was, like I said, like I was talking about before, this was a moment of time where I was actually sitting down and, you know, producing like a collection of work, right? So like each time I did something, I would see like see mistakes I made, will see things that I had to improve on, and I would then actively improve it as I created my next piece of art. And then also during this time was I started finally working on my sketchbook again. That sketchbook that I started like 3 years prior, I started actually putting art. Yeah, I know, insane. I started actually putting art onto every page. And like my main thing was I just didn't want to confine myself. I just wanted to allow myself to be creative, you know, like I had to get over this fear of just putting pen to paper because everything had to be perfect. I had to teach myself that it didn't have to be perfect. It was just a way of me to push myself, and to teach myself something new. And then like the last thing was I did a placement year during COVID, and this was my first I can hear
Okay,
you.
cool.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Sorry, I
Okay.
lost you there for a bit, Habibah, but you were just now talking about your placement year during COVID.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so placement year during COVID, it was my first time kind of experiencing working in industry, and what it actually meant to work in my field. And yeah, that was tough. It really was you know, ice water to the face or whatever. It was like a lot of hours, just like a lot. And it really, that was kind of the moment I needed where I started to like reconsider what I actually wanted from the future and how I wanted to live. And art like during that time really became like you know, this like escapism for me, and it was like my solace, because it was what really helped me through like just all of the rough bits. um COVID in general was such a harsh and hard time for us all. I'm sure. And like on top of that, to like having to deal with just a horrible work environment, like it was a lot. But this is kind of when I started to sit down and think, maybe I could be an artist. And yeah, like I mentioned before, when I was younger and I was like thinking about like studying A-level art, and when I had been like thinking about all of this stuff, or when I would be talking to people, I would never introduce myself as an artist because I felt like you had to be like a certain type of person, or you had to be in a certain part of your career journey, or you had to be just have like a certain something in order to be able to claim these titles, or in order to be able to work in this field. And when as I had like been producing these records, and I started to actually take more pride in myself and my ability, and start to actually figure out what I wanted with art, because like I also felt like a lot of imposter syndrome, because I felt like so many people knew exactly what they wanted to produce. They had such a distinctive style, and that was something I really struggled on. But then I remember like a friend told me, like randomly, because like I always felt like I would pick and choose, I would switch between like painting so many different things. I would do abstract one day, then landscape like another day, then surrealism another day. And like she like was like to me, like I can always tell when it's your art, like I can always tell when it's something you've done. um and that really like, and I was like, like that really kind of like drew me back for a moment, and I was like, maybe I do have a style, maybe like I do have all of this, and I'm just being too harsh on myself. And then once like I'd gotten to this stage of just like believing in myself a bit more, I realized, yeah, I am an artist. At the end of the day, I'm someone who creates and produces art. It doesn't matter if I don't have my name in like, I don't have multiple exhibitions under my belt. It doesn't matter if I don't have multiple works of art sold. At the end of the day, I am an artist. And the only person who can define whether I'm an artist or not is myself. Um, and the only person who has been holding myself back from defining me as an artist was just me. And it was because I had all of these stupid notions in my head about what it meant to produce art and what it meant to be an artist, right? And wow, like it felt so good. Like the first time I actually met someone and introduced myself as an artist, like it was just, I was so happy.
I can imagine.
Like, yeah, it just felt like I'd finally like said a truth out loud, right? That like mattered to me. And from this point, like I like, yeah, so I started to like actually consider what I wanted to do with my art. I knew I wanted to continue doing this, working on these vinyl records. I knew I wanted to work on the contact lenses. Actually, before COVID happened, as like one of the things that I actually lost due to COVID is I had been part of like a youth collective in at an art center in Camden, and we would like meet up every week where we would have like these art sessions. So we would like explore different like ideas creatively, and it was kind of like exercises to really help us relax and engage with art. And at the end of this program, we were actually going to create and put on our own exhibition. And what I was going to do was I was going to paint on contact lenses. And because like a big thing was for us to like the idea behind the exhibition was going to be like what we had taken away as a community, what we had learned and gained from all of the other youths. What I wanted to do is I wanted everyone to tell me like something important to them, like a favorite movie or favorite idea or something like that. And I was going to paint that on each contact lens. Like that was going to be a series that I was going to do. And it would be like, like their idea, like something that mattered to them. And it was really exciting. They had ordered all the materials, blah, blah, blah. Then COVID struck. Obviously, nothing was able to go ahead there with that. And so like that was kind of like a bummer, because like I was like, oh, I missed out on that. But then like certain things started happening with my art journey, you know, like I'd put like some of my art on like Depop, and you know, like I actually ended up selling a piece of art. It wasn't, unfortunately, it wasn't like my own completely original piece. It was like a Bob Ross painting. um but like this was the first time I had actually sold a piece of art, and that like I was so happy. I was like, okay, this is actually, you know, this can actually be a reality. So that was like the first big thing that happened to me. And then um I like last year, so 2022, I started well, during my final year in uni, there was like art sessions being run, and so I joined them, and that was like another really fun way for me to like kind of explore myself creatively, start like just like really like loosening up, and like releasing myself of these like shackles that I put myself in when it came to like my creative practice and like coming up with ideas. And then like I learned how to crochet, and that was really fun as well. And I started thinking about like what other ways that I can like, you know, improve my art. And then like in 2022 I responded to an open call for an exhibition, and in response I was selected to be part of the exhibition, and that was amazing. That was the first time I had my a piece of my work in a gallery. And I remember the night of like my private view, like I had my friends come to see me, and like I had just like been talking to someone previously about the fact that I hadn't actually ever gotten flowers before in my life, and I ended up getting like a bunch of flowers that night, which was really nice.
Oh.
And yeah, it was just such an amazing night to actually have my work be part of an exhibition,
Mhm.
to be in a gallery, to be talking, because I've been to a lot of private views in my life, usually as my sister's plus one. And so usually it would always be me talking about her work or like whatever artist I was talking to. So it was so amazing to finally be able to talk about my own work, you know, an original piece. Um, and like it was just so much fun, and I was like, okay, yeah. And then like a little bit after that, I responded to another open call where it was just like they were looking for pieces of art to have in an office space. um and so and they selected like three of my pieces, and so those are also currently up. And that was like another night where, you know, like it was like I went to the opening of that, and I was like, okay, yeah, that is my art on the
Well,
wall. Yeah, and I was like that's amazing. And then after that, you know, things slowed down a bit again. I had to focus on uni. It was my final year. So I was just like focusing on that. And then the moment, well, actually, and then I found like this pattern cutting course, because like for me with my art, it's never been, I've never wanted to keep myself in one medium. For me, art always like transcends like a bunch of mediums, and I really like this idea. So I started to also want to be like a lot more kind of, I wanted to express myself a lot more in like my clothes as well, my fashion. So I started to paint on my clothes. I started to paint on them, you know, like with bleach. That was like a really big thing. People were like experimenting with bleach when it came to their clothes. I started doing that as well. I made myself a bag um, using like stitching. And I just really wanted to express myself in like these kind of ways, like playing with texture. I never wanted material like that, the idea of like a new material to stop me from exploring how I could create art with it.
mhm.
So during the summer of 2022, I enrolled in a pattern cutting course where I learned how to, you know, draft patterns, how to cut them out of material, how to use sewing machines in order to make clothes, um, etc., etc. It was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. It was another kind of approach to art. It was another way of seeing how like you can use art from like a commercial standpoint as well. Like this is another kind of idea of like a future in art, another career in art. Um, and so like that also was like quite eye-opening for me. It was also something to consider. And then it was how I met Tanaka. So, you know, like we took part in this in the Festival University. So we had to apply to be part of this. And Festival University is a collaboration between like Ars Electronica and the Johannes Kepler University. And it's basically where they wanted to get like, you know, 200 people from different backgrounds around the world, different countries, with the idea that we would discuss this issue of climate change, and we would be able to use all of our differing perspectives to come up with, you know, how to actually tackle this problem. And, you know, this was like such an amazing opportunity because, firstly, I got to meet so many creatives. I got to meet so many people in their art journeys. Like there was a lot of tech, there was a lot of art, and these are both things that obviously I was really interested in because, you know, studied tech, worked in tech, but then art was also something that meant a lot to me. And it was like so amazing being able to meet people like Tanaka, being able to meet like so many of there were actually so many talented people in the program. It was so inspiring. A bunch of us like artists got together to like talk about our art and like let everyone knew what kind of fields we were working in, what we wanted to achieve with our art. And it, yeah, like it was so cool to see what people had achieved. You know, these were people younger than me, slightly older than me, my age, and being it really makes the world seem like so large, and like anything is possible when you're able to connect with other people interested in the same things that you are
100%.
passionate about.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it was so much fun. I had such a great time. um and that led me to coming up, you know, coming away from that and building all of these relationships with everyone, led to me working on the current project that I'm working on, which is actually similar to what I'd said, similar to the idea that I had come up with when I was part of that youth collective back before COVID, where I got everyone, you know, involved in the program, like a lot of people, to send me images that they've taken themselves, that meant a lot to them, that they really liked. And the series that I'm working on right now is where for each person, for each image they sent me, I painted that image on a contact lens, with the idea being that it would be like as if we were connected with the world through their perspective. The name of the series is Contact, and it's all about the contact that you have between people and how important that is. And I've done Tanaka's.
And I love
I
it.
with you. I am like, you know, there's a lot of people I have to get through. It's really hard to work in miniature and it can be really frustrating. So I haven't finished yet. I'm not close to finishing yet. Um but yeah, I was really happy that like I was able to come away from that experience with this new idea, and I definitely want to complete this series, and I'm hoping one day to like maybe exhibit this series. That would mean a lot to me. And I know right now, like I am I am at like the baby stages of my career in art. I'm not like, you know, I'm not making strides. I'm not currently working, you know, um, like as a main kind of career path. I'm not currently working in the arts. I'm not, you know, a part of like a bunch of exhibitions. I'm not selling loads of my art, etc. But I think it's like it's good for people to like know that that we all start from somewhere. It's good for me to still accept that I am still an artist, even though I'm at this stage. And I don't know, it would be really cool if I can look back on this in a few years and have like just a whole load more under my belt, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
so yeah, that would be my journey.
Oh my gosh, this was so inspiring, just like hearing this whole story. And you know, I just, as you were speaking, there were points where I was itching to ask you questions, but I didn't want to disrupt your flow.
Yeah.
And the one question that kept coming up in my mind was, during that time, when you were doing your GCSEs and then you did your A levels, and you kept hearing that voice in your head that told you, oh, you don't have what it takes, or you don't have that thing, that je ne sais quoi that makes you a worthy artist. And you kept telling yourself that, no, I want to go an academic route and do something else instead. What do you think might have influenced that thought pattern, or like that certain way of thinking that got you to discourage yourself from going down the path of art in the first place?
Yeah. So I think a large part is definitely like this idea that, there's no stability in art. Um, I think like I come from, like, even though my older sister is an artist, and I think that was a good thing, like the fact that I was blessed to even have this idea of like my older sister being an artist, because some people don't even have that. But I think if you come from a family, especially if you're like, I'm British Pakistani, I'm Muslim, so I'm a minority in a lot of ways, right? And I'm very proud of my identity as like a Pakistani and as a Muslim. I wear hijab. So being in Britain, being in the UK, you have to, like, even just living your life, it's a bit of a fight, right? Every day to
Yeah.
just be accepted. So kind of this idea where like you have to be the best, and the idea of being the best is getting the best grades, and like giving back to society in a way that's actually like tangible, if that makes sense. You're kind of in this mindset where you're like, the only things that like actually matter are like working as an engineer, working as a doctor, working in tech, like having these like, proper like stable jobs that have like a lot of money and stuff. um and it feels like if you don't do something like that, you're throwing away all of the effort that has been put into you. um all of like my parents' hard work and stuff, right? Like I'm just disregarding everything that they had to do to give us the life that we live. um and like I wouldn't say, like, I was also really really blessed in the way that, which I know like a lot of people unfortunately didn't have, in the way that my parents, with all of us, I think they weren't the kind of parents to put a lot of pressure on us when it came to grades, when it came to choosing subjects, when it came to what we wanted to study. They did actually leave it very like open for us. um but I know that I personally put a lot of pressure on myself, like to the point where like my parents would be like, why are you doing this? My sisters would be like, why are you doing this to yourself? And I think it was also because like I was the youngest, I was 6, and all of my sisters, like, mashallah, again, they were really amazing, they had achieved great things. And I like was like comparing myself to them, and I was also in a group in school where I felt like we were all like very motivated, we were all like very like aspirational, and we all were very focused on this one idea of what success looks like. And then also, yeah, I think it's just the idea that like when you live in certain spheres of life, when you are a certain type of person, you're always going to think certain things are like what you've made, like you've made it in life. And like I think definitely there's this notion in like in all the TV shows we watch, in all the movies, in all the books, blah blah, where it's like success is having a well-paying job, having good grades, having your own place, all of that stuff. And it stems from like, capitalism being this driving force, right? Whereas success is actually just whatever you make it. Like for me, success is just, and what I'm striving for, it's just happiness. um like it's just being happy in my career, um being happy with the people that I'm surrounded by, with like the people I choose to have in my life. um And that's something that you realize as you get older, that life doesn't have to be the same for you as it is for others, if that makes sense. I don't know if that answered your question. I really hope it did.
You are still answering it, and I I am just intrigued, and I couldn't relate more to
Yeah,
something. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. It's
So
life's
that
interesting.
issue, yeah, that issue of like finding that balance between what's expected of you by society and the expectations that you end up putting on yourself because of society. And man, just that feeling of wanting to give back and not wanting to be a quote unquote disappointment to your parents,
Yeah.
like just wanting to do so much for them because they've done so much for you as well. That's such a big thing. And
Mm-hmm.
it can be so difficult to arrive at a place where you feel that balance of doing what you want for yourself while also, keeping them in the loop, keeping their happiness in the loop, because there are cases where it's nearly, it's next to impossible to even think to do something that you want to do for your life. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, I'm happy for you that you are on a path where you're getting to that place that you are coming into yourself, and you're starting to give yourself more grace, as an artist, as a creative, and also just as a person in general. And I'm really, really, I feel privileged to have had the opportunity for you to walk through your journey with me, and with everyone else who might be listening in on this podcast right now. And before we get to the end of the episode, is there anything you would like to say to someone who might currently be experiencing, or who might have already experienced something similar to the early stages of your journey, or what you might be going through right now? Is there anything you would like to say, or any kind of advice you would like to give to that person if they're listening right now?
Sure. This actually ties in really nicely. And it's like one, and it relates to something like a really big thing that I believe in, that everything has its own time, and that things will happen when it's right for it to happen. But I was reading something, I think yesterday, um, and it was talking about this notion of, like, how people have started saying, oh, you need to be delusional about your own life. But the person was actually like, no, rather than saying that you need to be delusional about your life, you need to have undying faith in yourself.
Mm,
Like, that just really resonated with me, this idea of having undying faith in yourself. And like, that is like, if there's only one message that even one person takes away from this podcast, it's this idea, to have undying faith in yourself. And I'm going to repeat it a lot because I feel like it's such strong words. And they're like really, they're words that carry a lot of meaning, and and we need to hear it, because I think there's always going to be times in your life where you're coming across barriers, even where it might be you're unwell, like physically, mentally. It might be that you want to do something, but for whatever reason you're unable to do it, maybe because of your family, maybe because of society, maybe because um you don't have the means to do it right now. There can be any issues when it comes to personal, professional, where like the whole world will be against you. But at the end of the day, if you have undying faith in yourself, you're going to be able to get through it. You're going to persevere. Um, and like, especially when it comes to this idea of being a creative, being an artist, it can be a hard career path, and it will be really hard to break through to get people to see your art and to see you and see your potential. But if you have undying faith in yourself, you're gonna make sure that the world sees you. You're gonna make sure that you get what you want out of the world, right? So I think that would be the final message that I'd want to leave everyone with.
Well, I needed to hear that personally. Me, I needed to hear that word right now at the stage that I'm at in my life. And yeah, thank you so much.
I need to hear it as well. So,
thank you so much for sharing that and for your time, dude. Like, I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful that you took the time to, you know, share your journey on this episode. And yeah, I'm really thankful. Thank you for coming on today.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for listening to me, because I'm really grateful to be heard, you know, it means a lot.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Okay, and to everyone else who's listening, thank you guys for joining today, and I will catch you in the next episode.